President Biden's expected to announce a new package of military aid for Kyiv. It will likely contain what one U.S. official called a very important new capability, namely a Patriot missile defense system. That could help Ukraine better defend itself against Russian attacks. But training personnel on how to use the missiles properly could take as long as 6 weeks. And I'm very pleased to welcome Marina Myron from the Defense Studies Department at King's College London for more on this story. Marina, Patriot missiles could soon be headed for Ukraine. Do you think they would make a serious difference in this war?
Thank you for having me. So, yes, absolutely. First of all, we have to consider that this is a more sophisticated system that is being promised to Ukraine. So, in theory, Patriot missile systems could make a difference. However, we have to remember that they will not be deployed immediately and that training has to take place. There has been an arrangement to train Ukrainian troops in Germany to operate those systems. So the big question is what will happen on the battlefield until the systems arrive? Will they be able to arrive on time to save the Ukrainian power grid? So that's basically the main problem. And also, as Zelenskyy and General Zaluzhny have pointed out, it's not enough. So they want long-range missiles, which the United States doesn't want to provide. So in how far just Patriot systems alone will be able to change the course of the war remains questionable.
So there's this question of timing that's crucial. There's, of course, also been talk of Russia preparing another major offensive, possibly even with help from Belarus. Do you think that that is realistic, given months of Russian setbacks on the battlefield?
Indeed, there have been signs basically meeting Lukashenko and discussing these matters behind closed doors and then signing military cooperation on December 3rd. The document is not disclosed, so there is a lot of secrecy behind it. Obviously, this is all being reported by Western media, which Russia wants in order to sort out, in order to basically make this threat credible. But Belarus doesn't seem to want to be involved in the war. And as a matter of fact, there is a lot of opposition and a lot of citizens have gone to Ukraine to join the Ukrainian military. So for Lukashenko, it will be very difficult to create some kind of a balance because Belarus is dependent on Russia on the one hand, and it's training Russian troops as we speak. And on the other hand, it has this popular opposition to any involvement. So perhaps Belarus will not enter the war as an additional actor, but what it could do is provide a launch platform for Russia to launch its offensive. However, as the Kremlin spokesman said, Dmitry Peskov, he neither confirmed nor denied the fact that there will be a major offensive, kind of leaving us all guessing and in the dark. And it could be a way to lure away Ukrainian troops and to refocus on a different geographical position while Russia is making or trying to make gains in the Donbass.
Thank you for that assessment. Marina, before I let you go, I also want to ask you what you think about President Zelensky's visit to the United States. Do you think it's the right time for him to be making this trip?
Well, perhaps it's not the right time given the chaos that is going on in Ukraine. However, it is important to counterbalance that, Putin-Lukashenko meeting and the growing ties between Putin and Erdogan in light of the Turkish election. So for Zelenskyy, it's important to secure the support of the United States. And especially because there is some skepticism coming from the Republicans as far as the aid is concerned, and they want to launch an audit, or at least they threaten to do so, to see where is that money and all the weaponry is going and what Ukraine is doing with that. So appearing there personally might help to strengthen the ties and show to the international community, and specifically to Putin, that the US is still standing behind Ukraine and that US will be supporting Ukraine. Because if Ukraine were to lose the help of the United States, Europe combined wouldn't be able to make up for that help, both in terms of financial aid and in terms of military aid. So it's very important to make sure that the United States doesn't withdraw. And of course, Zelenskyy might plead to get more advanced weapons so that the Ukrainian forces can achieve the aims outlined by Zelenskyy to push back the Russian forces and to retake Crimea. Especially important, this is amidst the skepticism growing amongst European leaders such as Macron, who is considering that there is a venue for a dialogue with Putin.
Okay, the key role of the United States. We'll be keeping a close eye on that meeting, of course. Thank you so much for joining us with that update. That's Marina Myron. And meanwhile, in a speech to his defense chiefs, Vladimir Putin has vowed that Russia will achieve all of its goals in Ukraine. The Russian president told them the military would receive whatever it needed, without financial limits. He announced that the Russian Navy would be equipped with new hypersonic cruise missiles early next year. Putin also stressed that Russia would continue to develop its strategic nuclear forces, and that the new Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile would be ready for deployment in the near future. Well, Vladimir Putin stressed that the Russian army would get everything it needs to fight this war in Ukraine.
Everything a serviceman needs should be modern, comfortable, and reliable. And the supply should be based on real needs. If some departmental standards are outdated, they need to be changed quickly. I would like to draw the attention of the Minister of Defense, the Chief of the General Staff, and all the commanders who are represented here. We have no funding restrictions. The country, the government give everything that the army asks for. Everything. I hope the answer will be appropriately formulated and the corresponding results will be achieved.
So to help us understand all this, I'd like to bring in Roman Goncharenko from DW's Russian service in Bonn. Thanks so much for taking the time. We have Putin inviting thousands of soldiers to then only speak to them for a few minutes. Can you tell us more about the message that he was trying to get across?
Well, there was not much new in what he said. The central message was the war in Ukraine will continue. Russia is not backing up. Russia will try to persuade its goals in Ukraine, which is to control most of its territory, basically. And he also said a few interesting things. Anyway, I think maybe one of the most interesting things is that he acknowledged there were problems with mobilization. He said that those problems should get better, so the problems should be solved. He said that there are enough forces have been mobilized, 300,000, and he hinted that at the moment that's enough. And it's important because that mobilization is not very popular in the Russian society. He also promised the modernization of the army, as you've just mentioned, and he said that there will be no financial limits. So he basically said to his soldiers and officers, tell me what you need and I will give it to you. I will give the money for that. He also repeated his previous remarks about blaming the West and seeing that the Russia is not to blame for this war. He said it's a tragedy, but we were forced to act. And it struck me that he very clearly said that he sees himself in a kind of a better position than Ukraine and the West because Russia has modern weapons that other countries don't have. He very clearly stated that. So he thinks it was a good time, the right time for Russia to strike because Russia has better weapons. So it was very clear that this is his thinking. And he also said that what's interesting was said not by President Putin, but by his defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, who suggested to increase the Russian army, and it should be 1.5 million soldiers. It is interesting that President Putin already last year decided per decree to increase the Russian army, and it is supposed to be just over 1 million starting in January, and now here comes one more increase. So that means that Russia is having losses in this war in Ukraine, and those losses need to be compensated.
Okay, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed on that story. That's Roman Goncharenko in Bonn.